Nimrod was a man whose story mixes facts and legends, marked by power, ambition, and challenge. Known as a powerful hunter before the Lord, he was much more than that. A visionary leader, the founder of great cities, and the architect of a tower that promised to reach the heavens. His trajectory, marked by extraordinary feats and controversial choices, left deep marks on humanity, becoming a symbol of both strength and rebellion. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting biblical stories and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Nimrod was born in a time that seemed to breathe newness and uncertainty. The world still carried the weight of the flood, and people walked the earth with careful steps, as if they felt they were stepping on something sacred. He was the son of Cush, grandson of Ham, and brought with him the blood of a lineage marked by strength and survival. But from the beginning, there was something about him that seemed different, something that caught your attention. Nimrod was no ordinary child. They say that even in his early years, he already showed signs of unshakable determination. His eyes glowed like burning coals, full of curiosity and an audacity that few dared to challenge. While other boys were satisfied with simple games, Nimrod ran through the fields, facing challenges that seemed too great for his age. Nature recognized him immediately. The winds blew stronger as he passed, and the animals, fierce as they were, seemed to hesitate in his presence. He wasn't just strong. There was a magnetism to his figure, something that made people stop to look and wonder what the fate of this peculiar boy would be. Growing up, Nimrod discovered his passion for hunting. And it wasn't just any hunting. He hunted with purpose, with almost superhuman skill. His arrows never missed their target, and the forest seemed to bend beneath his feet. Each achievement made his legend greater. Men spoke of him with admiration and awe. "A mighty hunter before the Lord," was what they said, although no one knew for sure whether that was a compliment or a warning. Time passed, and Nimrod was no longer just a boy running through the fields or hunting in the woods. It grew like a river that gains strength as it flows down the mountain, expanding its reach and impacting everything around it. From a young age, his physical size was impressive. He had broad shoulders, firm hands, and a presence that made older people bow, even if they didn't realize it. But it wasn't just his body that distinguished him. His mind was sharp as a blade, and his words carried the weight of someone who seemed to see beyond what the eyes could reach. In the villages where he passed, young people wanted to follow him, imitate his achievements, learn from him. Nimrod had a special ability to inspire others, to transform fear into courage and doubt into determination. He didn't need to assert his authority. It flowed naturally, as if written in its essence. What fascinated people was not just his strength, but the balance he seemed to have between body and spirit. Nimrod knew how to listen, but when he spoke, his voice seemed to echo like the roar of a lion. Once, while walking with a small group of followers, an older man with life-weary eyes looked deeply at him and said, "You have been chosen for something greater, Nimrod. Men need a leader like you." Those words remained engraved in his mind, like an echo that would accompany him for the next few days. He felt something awaken inside him, a need to build, to gather, to shape the world according to his vision. It was at that moment that Nimrod realized that his destiny was not just in the fields and forests, but in command of men, in dominion over territories. He didn't just want to beat nature, he wanted to transform the earth, give shape to chaos, and build something eternal. His eyes, now filled with ambition, began to turn to the fertile plains of Shinar, where the true story of his greatness would begin. The plains of Shinar lay like a golden carpet beneath the sun, vast and fertile, inviting to anyone with a vision of building something great. And it was there, under the open sky, that Nimrod decided to steady his steps. He was no longer just a hunter or a leader of small groups. Now his ambition was guiding him towards something much greater, bringing men together, centralizing power, and shaping the world to his own liking. The fame that preceded him soon attracted people from all over, willing to follow him as if he had been chosen for something divine or perhaps defiantly human. With a sharp look and a voice that commanded attention, Nimrod didn't need much effort to organize those who came to him. Men found in Nimrod more than a leader. He was a symbol of strength, someone who seemed capable of taking on even the heavens if necessary. Under his leadership, the lands of Shinar began to take shape. Small towns became towns, and towns became cities. And at the center of it all stood Babylon, with its solid foundations and a silent promise of eternity. As the work progressed, Nimrod walked through the fields, observing the movement around him. People worked hard, following his orders as if he himself had the power to shape their destinies. There was something in Nimrod's eyes that inspired awe and fear at the same time. He was no ordinary man. His name began to be whispered in distant corners, and those who had never seen him were already speaking of him as the most powerful among men. But it was not enough to build cities. Nimrod felt that he needed something more, something that would eternalize his name beyond the limits of the earth. It was then that his mind began to conceive an audacious idea, something that would not only bring men together, but defy the heavens themselves. As he watched the first walls of Babylon rise, the seed of his greatest work was already beginning to sprout. Babylon grew every day, transforming itself into something that human eyes had never seen before. The buildings stood like giants of stone and clay, firm and imposing, reflecting the spirit of their leader. Nimrod walked through the streets with his head held high, observing every detail, every wall that rose. He didn't just see a city. I saw the beginning of something that would surpass the boundaries of time, a work so grand that the gods themselves would seem small before it. And then, from his ambitious heart, was born the idea that would change everything. Nimrod summoned the leaders and builders and declared in a strong voice that always silenced murmurs, "Let us build a tower, not just an ordinary tower, but something that reaches the heavens. A monument to our name, to our strength. Thus, we will never be scattered throughout this land." His words echoed, arousing both fascination and fear. The idea was bold, risky, almost impossible, but no one dared question Nimrod. There was something in his presence that made even the most cautious believe the impossible. Orders were given, and work began. Day after day, people carried stones, shaped bricks, and erected the tower that seemed to defy the Creator himself. The sound of hammers and work songs mixed with the wind, as if the earth was alive and pulsating under Nimrod's command. He watched everything from afar, his eyes shining with a satisfaction that seemed to grow as the tower rose. But there was something in the air, something no one could explain. The winds seemed stronger, the nights quieter. Nimrod, however, did not let himself be shaken. For him, each stone placed was a message that men could go beyond their limits. The tower grew, like a colossus tearing through the sky. From afar, his shadow already fell over the plains of Shinar, a constant reminder of the human strength gathered under Nimrod's command. For the workers, each day of construction was a mixture of exhaustion and pride. There was something almost magical about that work. It was not just made of stones and bricks, but also of the sweat, hope, and ambition of everyone who built it. The sound of work echoed from morning to night, hammers, voices, and the sizzle of fresh clay molded in the sun. Nimrod, as always, walked among them, observing everything. He was the heart of the work, and everyone knew it. His firm steps amidst the chaos of construction carried an authority that no one dared to challenge. If any worker became discouraged, Nimrod's penetrating gaze was enough to rekindle the fire within him. The tower was not just a symbol of power. She was a calling, a summons for everyone to achieve something beyond what they had ever dreamed of. But there was a weight in the air, something invisible, that seemed to accompany the work as it rose. Nimrod paid no attention to this. He saw the tower as a cry for humanity, a declaration of independence, as if to say, "We don't need anyone but ourselves." And as the tower rose, he began to feel that he was closer to touching the heavens, as if each stone placed brought him closer to something greater, something that was beyond the comprehension of mortals. Still, not everything was as solid as the tower's foundations. Voices began to emerge, murmurs of doubt among the workers, little sparks of fear about what this really meant. The winds seemed stranger, and the nights were interrupted by whispers that no one could explain. Work on the tower continued, but the air felt heavier every day. The sky, once clear and generous, now seemed to watch the progress with a strange restlessness. The wind was blowing stronger, carrying with it something that no one could see, but everyone felt. Even so, Nimrod remained firm, ignoring any sign that could divert his attention. For him, the tower was a symbol of what men could achieve, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would stop him. Then it happened. No one can say exactly when it started. Some say it was one morning when the sun appeared timidly on the horizon. Others swear it was at night, when the stars seemed to shine dimmer, as if they watched in silence. The workers, who previously moved like a perfect gear, began to stumble and get confused. Simple words, used every day, suddenly no longer made sense. A man asked for water and received bricks. Another called for tools and only received confused looks. Chaos spread like wildfire. The screams began to emerge, first timid, then like a roar. "What are you saying? I don't understand!" Men who had once laughed together and worked side by side now argued, their eyes full of fear. It was as if their tongues had been ripped out and replaced with strange, disjointed words. Nimrod, upon hearing the commotion, climbed onto one of the tower's platforms and tried to calm the situation. His voice, which had always been a beacon of order, was now lost in the confusion. He spoke, but half the men looked at him without understanding. Others tried to respond, but their words sounded like distorted echoes. The work stopped. The tools were dropped on the ground, and the men, previously united, began to separate, forming small groups that looked at each other as strangers. Nimrod was silent for a long moment, watching the chaos unfolding around him. The voices that used to match were now disordered and strange, like the noise of a storm that no one could control. He climbed down from the tower's platforms and walked among the men, trying to understand what had happened. But each step revealed a bleaker picture. The unity he had built with so much effort was in pieces, as if an invisible force had broken the ties that held those people together. Groups began to form spontaneously, each speaking their own language, creating new alliances based solely on mutual understanding. Nimrod, who had previously been the central link of all, now found himself facing a fragmented people, each part heading in a different direction. He tried to speak, tried to order them to stay, but his words were met with only confusion and strange looks. It was as if something greater than his strength and leadership had intervened, something no human power could resist. The tower, that monumental work that should have been the symbol of its greatness, was unfinished, its construction abruptly interrupted. The stones that were once placed with precision now lay scattered about like a silent battlefield. The sky, which seemed so close when the work began, now seemed distant and unreachable. Nimrod felt in his heart that there was something deeper at that moment, something that was beyond the control of any man. Still, he didn't give up. As the groups dispersed, he walked among them, his eyes still fixed on the tower in the distance. For him, that confusion was just an obstacle, a new battle to be won. But what he did not know was that even as he tried to regain control, his influence began to spread beyond the borders of Shinar, carrying with it both the legend of his power and the seeds of his rebellion. With the unfinished tower at his back and the groups of people scattering like leaves in the wind, Nimrod became something more than a leader or builder. He was now a symbol, although that symbol carried different meanings to those who knew him. For some, he represented human strength, the determination to face the impossible. For others, he was the very personification of rebellion, the one who dared to defy divine orders and paid the price for it. Stories about him began to travel along with the scattered peoples. Each group that moved away from Shinar took with them fragments of its legend. Some said that Nimrod was almost a god, someone who commanded the winds and the earth, who could shape the destinies of nations with his strength. Others painted him as a tyrant, a man whose desire for power blinded him to the consequences of his actions. What no one denied was the strength of the impact he had left. Meanwhile, in Shinar, Nimrod continued to rule those who still remained. Babylon, even marked by confusion, still stood as the center of its authority. But Nimrod was no longer the same man. The frustration of seeing his project fail seemed to fuel an even greater flame in his heart. He began to devote his energy to consolidating his power in other ways, erecting new symbols, new cities and systems that guaranteed his influence. Some say that it was during this period that Nimrod began to engage in practices that directly challenged the Creator's principles. Reports speak of strange rituals, of an idolatry that emerged as an alternative to divine worship. His wife, Semiramis, would have been a fundamental part of this movement, helping to create a religious structure that promoted devotion to man and creation rather than the Creator. Nimrod seemed to be building not just physical cities, but also a system that would carry his mark for generations, scattering his ideas like seeds in the wind. The winds of dispersion carried more than confused tongues. They carried the marks of Nimrod to distant lands. His ideas, his practices, and even the stories about his strength and leadership crossed borders, becoming fragments that shaped entire cultures. In every corner where the scattered settled, echoes of Shinar appeared, echoes of the ambition and power that had been born under the shadow of the unfinished tower. The cities built by Nimrod became references for the new people. Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh were not just places. They were symbols of centralization, civilization, and a form of government that placed man at the center of everything. These ideas spread roots, shaping kingdoms and dynasties that still carried, even if unconsciously, the essence of Nimrod's legacy. But his influence was not just political or cultural. The system of worship that he and Semiramis had promoted also found fertile soil in foreign lands. Images and idols that represented human power, nature, and even celestial figures began to appear in other nations, carrying with them the shadow of rebellion against the Creator. These cults, often mixed with local legends, became part of the spiritual fabric of new peoples, as if the figure of Nimrod had transcended time and space. Meanwhile, in Babylon, Nimrod still reigned. He continued to command with the same force, although his vision was now more focused on the impact of his legacy. He knew that the men who left took pieces of his story with him, but he also knew that those pieces carried something bigger than himself. The confusion that had begun as a punishment seemed to have given the world something unexpected, a new order, but an order permeated with the essence of Nimrod, as if his shadow walked alongside everyone who had left Shinar. Time passed, and the figure of Nimrod became increasingly shrouded in mystery. His deeds were engraved in the stones of Babylon, but they also echoed in the stories told around campfires in distant lands. He was called by many names, described in different ways, but one thing was certain. No one who had heard of him could ignore his impact. Nimrod was not just a man, he had become an idea, a legend that grew and took on a life of its own. Still, Nimrod's end, like everything in his story, was surrounded by shadows. Some say he was betrayed by those closest to him, people who grew tired of his relentless authority. Others believe that his death came violently, like a roar of divine fury. There are also those who speak of a final judgment, a symbolic fall that marked the end of his reign, but no one knows for sure. The truth about his last days was lost, swallowed by time, as if destiny itself wanted to hide the conclusion of such a controversial life. What was not lost was the impact of his story. Nimrod's rebellion, his strength, his ability to unite and also to divide, left deep marks on humanity. Babylon continued to be a symbol of both greatness and arrogance. The ideas he planted grew, turning into systems of government, religions, and traditions that would echo for centuries. And as his legend spread, the question remained, what can we learn from his career? Nimrod's seeds, spread by the wind, continued to grow, taking root in places he had never set foot on. His shadow, filled with glory and tragedy, still hung over the world, and as men erected their own towers, physically or symbolically, it was impossible not to remember the valiant hunter who once defied the heavens. The story of Nimrod, like a river that runs through mountains and valleys, does not end in a final point, but in a continuous flow that reaches us to this day. He was more than a man. It was a symbol of strength, ambition, and rebellion. His life reminds us of the power that exists in unity and in the human desire to create something great, but it also warns us about the dangers of pushing limits without considering the consequences. The tower he tried to raise to the heavens was not just an architectural feat. It was a metaphor for the human heart, always seeking to rise above what is permitted. She shows us the innate desire to control destiny, to leave a legacy, to be remembered. But it also teaches us that when that ambition strays from greater purposes, it can become an inevitable downfall. Nimrod's lessons are in every decision we make as individuals and as a society. His story challenges us to look within and ask, what are we building? Are we building something to unite and inspire, or to feed our pride? The world he helped shape, with its cities and systems, still bears fragments of his vision, but also the cracks that came from his disobedience. Nimrod teaches us that true strength is not in defying the heavens, but in recognizing our limits and living in harmony with them. He is a reminder that ambition can be a double-edged weapon, capable of lifting us to great heights, but also of leading us to ruin. And so, as we look at the story of this hunter who sought to conquer everything, we are invited to reflect on what really matters, what we leave behind, not just in the stones we lift, but in the lives we touch, the values we live, and the way we choose to walk the land we were given. If you liked Nimrod's story and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming, be sure to like this video and share it with those you love. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, let's explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.